Okay, I think what I have to say about this episode today is whoa. Have you guys ever heard of like birth order and how birth order may influence parts of your life down to like your love life, how you behave, how your children behave, how to parent, sibling rivalry, firstborn? Today, I'm interviewing Dr. Robert Hurst, and this is a Harvard trained provider. He wrote Life's Fingerprint, and the book focuses on birth order. And I was so intrigued by this topic of like figuring out, like, especially with birth order or with mixed families and single children, and then families that have 12 kids. Oh, I just had a lot of questions. I had fun with today's episode. I hope you enjoy meeting Dr. Hurst and learning a little bit today about birth order. Okay, let's get to it. What does a contraction feel like? How do I know if I'm in labor? And what does the day of labor look like? Wait, is this normal? Hey, I'm Heidi. My best friends call me Hides. I'm a certified birth doula, host of this podcast, and author of Birth Story, an interactive pregnancy guidebook. I have supported hundreds of women through their labor and deliveries, and I believe every one of them, and you, deserves a microphone and a stage. So here we are. Listen each week to get answers to these tough questions. Birth Story, where we talk about pregnancy, labor, deliveries, where we tell our stories and share our feelings. And of course, chat about our favorite baby products and motherhood. And because I'm passionate about birth outcomes, you will hear from some of the top experts in labor and delivery. Whether you are pregnant, trying desperately to get pregnant, or you just love a good birth story, I hope you will stick around and be part of this birth story family. Hey, Dr. Hurst, welcome to the Birth Story podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Heidi. Glad to be here.
Yeah, well, everybody just heard in the intro, we're talking about birth order. And so the first thing I have to know as a doctor who went to Harvard, what got you interested in birth order?
Well, as an orthodontist, I deal with teenagers all my life. I get older, they don't. And I have to get their cooperation. So I found early in my career, I was looking for some sort of tool that I could use to quickly determine their level of cooperation and how I could reach them. And I found very quickly that all children from the same family are not alike, and they don't even want to be alike. So what I did was I searched around and I finally came on this idea of a birth order theory. And it's really kind of oversimplified, which I found out. People talk about the oldest, the middle, and the youngest. But I found out that wasn't true at all. I found out there was, of course, the firstborn is an only child. And that only child becomes a firstborn when the second child is born. So they kind of change in birth orders. But then there's the second child. Some people call that one the middle child, the stubborn child. That's a child that doesn't want to be told what to do because number one wants to be in charge and tell everybody what to do. So number two doesn't. So they're really not stubborn. They just want to protect their own space. And then number three is kind of the sweetheart in the family. We call them laughing on the outside, crying on the inside, because they don't want to let everyone know how sensitive they really are. So they sometimes have a shield around themselves that make them look tougher than they really are. And then there's number four, which is the true baby in the family. That's the one that can be kind of loud and, it's not very responsible because the older siblings take care of the younger sibling. This is the kind of patient that drops their appointment card as they go out the door, but their older siblings take care of them. And that's how they are all their life. And people don't change. So I started using that theory, and it only worked about a third of the time. And I said, I was about ready to just get rid of it. And then I decided to look at all the families in my practice and all the children and their ages. And what I discovered was 2/3 of my patients were separated by brothers and sisters by at least 4 years. So that child was nurtured at home like an only child. They had a birth order. Now, the simplest way to think of a birth order is your chronologic birth order by age. But these children, let's say it's a second child, the first child's away at school. And this child, 4 or 5 or more years younger, is at home with a parent and getting the nurturing of an only child. So what happens is it takes those birth order characteristics, and we said number 2 could be stubborn. Well, a 2 only, because you'd add the only birth order, is an immovable object. They are really, really tough. Okay, so it amplifies, intensifies, and magnifies all the characteristics of their birth order. So a 2 only is really not a 2, and a 3 only is really not a 3. So when I put that information in, all of a sudden everything worked. I could understand all my patients.
Okay, but what was the original pain point as an orthodontist? Like you said, like getting to know your patients, but I'm assuming that there was like a connection point or a pain point that led you to go seeking more data. So like, I'm curious what that was.
Well, with orthodontics, you ask children to do things. And of course, they're teenagers. You ask them to brush their teeth.
Compliance.
Right, compliance. Or wear some rubber bands, or, be careful of what food you eat because they're going to break the braces. And after a while, you can start to predict which child's going to follow the rules, which child is not going to follow the rules, which one's going to break everything, and that's what I found. Their behaviors, and certain birth orders have certain behaviors. Now, there's one other type of double birth order besides that only, and I'll use the example of Princess Di. Everyone remembers Princess Di.
Yeah.
Well, Princess Di had 2 older sisters, and then there was a big gap of 4 or 5 years, and then she was born. So when she was born, she becomes a 3 only double birth order, except for the fact that a year or 2 later, her brother was born. So Princess Di has 2 ordinal numbers. She's the oldest in the second family, but she's the 3rd birth. So she is a 3 and also a 1. And if we think about her life, as a royal, she was trying to tell people what to do. She fought with the royal family. But then as a 3, she was sensitive about landmines, and she was trying to get those removed in undeveloped countries. So she was really 2 different people. And that's what happens with double birth orders of the ordinal type. They express 2 different personalities at different times. And if people could understand, a birth order is running throughout your life. It's helping make all your decisions. You don't realize it, but it's influencing everything. And if you could just tune into it, it's really a power that can really make your life much less stressful. It did mine anyway.
Yeah. So it sounds like by investigating and researching and gathering this data, you were then able to perhaps implement tools or conversations or something to help motivate your teenage clients with
Absolutely.
compliance.
Absolutely.
So-
In fact, it was one of my patients who was a pediatrician. I was treating some of his kids, and I ended up treating him as well. And I told him about this, and he started using it in his practice, and he said, "You've got to write it down. You got to write the book." I said, "I am not an author. I'm not going to." He says, "No, you have to." He says, "This works. This really works." He says, you've got to get this information out there. So that's what led to the book, Life's Fingerprint, How Birth Order Affects Your Path Throughout Life. That's where it came from.
Oh, it's such a beautiful concept. And, I would argue that somebody who has gone through all of the classes that you had to take for undergrad and graduate and to become an orthodontist, you studied things like the body and psychology and how the mind works and how not just how like the mouth and the jaw and the teeth work also. So I'm assuming there was a lot of research and statistics and study that was part of your core background also.
Oh, yes. And in fact, I did a lot of research into birth order itself, because it really started with a fellow by the name of Alfred Adler at the turn of the century, and he was he was in the same psychoanalytical society as Freud, but they didn't get along very well because Freud was the oldest in his father's second family, and Adler was a number two, had an older brother, so he didn't want to be told what to do by Freud. So it was just a matter of time before they split ways. And Adler said, kids are developed by their interactions with their siblings, where Freud said, no, it's the interaction with their parents that make them who they are. So they had a differing of opinion. Now, it does work that way for an only child, because the only child's interaction is only with the parents. And they take on the flavor, not all only children are alike, but take on the flavor of the dominant parent's birth order. So an only child, he could have a flavor of a number two. And I tell that to people, and I say, well, your flavor is a number two or a number three. And I said, I'll make you a bet that your wife or your husband, whoever it might be, is a number two or number three. And it always seems to work.
Wow.
Said, wow, how'd that happen?
Yeah. So I feel like these are layers for me of like, I'm really into the Enneagram, and I talk on my podcast and like on Instagram about how the Enneagram, or what your Enneagram is, plays a role in what type of birth support you need, actually, based on personality traits. But again, I'm thinking like layer one, birth order, layer two comes in with personality,
Right.
and some Enneagram traits. So I'll have to send you some of the Enneagram types for birth and labor support and see if you can peg, I would wonder, with birth order and Enneagram.
Well, we'll have to find their birth order. Now, it's really easy to find someone's birth order.
Okay.
You want to find someone's real birth order. Just because they say they're a one or a two or a three or whatever. And by the way, after 4, it starts all over again. Number 5 is like a 1, but it's like primary and secondary colors. It's the same color, but it's not as vibrant, as the hue. But then number 6 is like a 2, but not quite as, we'll say, stubborn.
Okay, I was wondering this because as a birth worker, there's tons of families I work with that are on like baby 11 and 12. So,
exactly.
yes.
Exactly. So there's different levels, but you have to find out the real birth order, and it's about 7 or 8 questions, and in the book it takes the person through the questionnaire to find their real birth order. The first question you want to ask is, were there any spaces of 4 or more years between anybody in the family, any siblings?
Okay.
And that tells you right away if you've got any double birth orders within the family. That's probably the most key. But you have to look at the family as a unit. You might have a child in the family that has medical problems. And if the family resources go toward that child, that changes the pecking order of the children, because number 1, if it's not number 1, it's number 2. Number 1 feels, wait, it's supposed to be all about me. How come I'm not, the resources aren't going to me, they're going to number 2 or number 3. And then if it's number 2, then number 3 can sometimes jump up over number 2. Now, sibling rivalry is usually between 1 and 2. Now, everybody knows the story about Cain and Abel. That didn't end very well. But number 1 wants to hold the throne, and number 2 wants to take the throne. So in modern society, number 1 is usually the better student. Why? Well, they're ahead in school, and when the next child comes along, they're going to make sure they stay ahead in school. And number 2 can't compete that way, but they can become the athlete. So they become athlete and have good personalities. The number 1 may be a little more bookish. But what happens is, if number 1 slips in school, number 2 starts to become a straight A student, and they demote number 1. And that doesn't work out very well. A little competition's good, but dethroning is not good. So you have to, that's another thing you want to find out. You say, well, who was better in school? And you find out if there was dethroning. And then if there's, and you're involved with births, what happens when there's twins or triplets? Oh my gosh. There's all kinds of energy in the family that goes into that, and that can change the birth orders of the other children. Just like blended families, when 2 families get together, if your birth order goes up, you get along great with the new family. If your birth order goes down, you're a problem. So you have to look at about 7 or 8 characteristics before you find your real birth order.
Okay. And then we're using these tools, like me as an individual, and to help us with things like, could the boss that I'm looking at, like maybe in an interview, I'm thinking, you should ask about their siblings or what their birth order is, and making decisions about who to hire on your team or who to work with or how to parent. Or my brain is just churning of all of the ways that I could use this information in real life. But I want to throw
Great.
a couple of examples out. You're
Okay.
talking and I'm like, wow. Okay. So let's start with me. I'm one of 5,
All right.
but blended family. So
Here you go.
I was wondering about miscarriage, if that plays a role, because my mom had many miscarriages in between my first 2 siblings and me.
Yes. Now, you were the number 1 birth that lived.
I'm the first one. Yeah. So I have an older brother, 2 years later,
Oh.
an older sister, then a bunch of miscarriages, and then 7 years later, me.
Okay. All right. So if we forget the miscarriages,
Mm-hmm.
you are a 3 only birth order.
Okay.
Okay. You want to save the world. You see the world. You see the big, big picture. Okay. And the picture is humanity. You see it all, and you're so intuitive. And I mean, but you've got the only with you, so that gives you the power to get some things done, which is really good. That's a good thing. But you also have to be careful with alcohol and drugs, because as a number 3, you're open to everything. And which means you're willing to try some things that other people wouldn't try. So you have to be careful you don't get hooked on something. But now let's talk about the miscarriages. We talk about a phantom child. Let's see. A phantom child happens when you have a birth and the parents keep that child alive by having birthdays for that child. And then the other children cannot compete against that child because that child is perfect in every way. It sounds to me, with so many miscarriages, that didn't happen in your family.
No, it didn't.
But it happened in Van Gogh's family. Vincent van Gogh, remember the painter?
Oh, yeah.
Cut off his ear.
Cut off his ear.
Okay. His brother was born, or he was born exactly 1 year after his brother, who died as an infant and had the same name. Now, wouldn't that drive you a little crazy? And the mother continued to celebrate the birthdays of this dead sibling for all his life. So he could never compete against that sibling because that sibling was perfect. And that's what you call a phantom child. It happens sometimes. But I don't think it happened in your family. So those miscarriages won't affect you at all.
I would say in my experience and career as a birth worker, I see more of what you're saying as phantom child when it's a later loss, like a stillbirth at full term versus an early miscarriage. Yeah. So that all makes sense to me. So then 12 years later, my parents at this point were divorced, and I have a new sibling, my little brother, and he's 3 and I'm 12. So there's a 9-year difference, but so not a biological sibling, but we were raised together because his biological father was not in the picture.
It doesn't make any difference about the biology. It's who you're sitting at the breakfast table with.
Yep. So I'm sitting at the breakfast table now. My older siblings are gone. They're off to college. They're adults. And I now have a new baby brother.
Okay. Now he in the numbers, he would be a 4 only.
Okay.
Which would be a mess. Because those 2 birth orders are as far apart as you can get. The number 4 is the irresponsible baby that gets everything because he's the little baby, and then you put the only with it, and that gives the baby power of an adult, but he's a baby. And so all of a sudden you're seeing, and they don't have any control over which one is running. Is it that only part or the four? Okay. Now that's the other thing about double birth orders. If you can start to manage your double birth order, like for you, if you can say, okay, now I am going to be the only child. I am going to be in charge. I'm going to be running the show. I am the responsible adult. Now, on the other hand, I'm going to be the sensitive, caring, intuitive number three. Understanding your birth order, all of a sudden, you're great powers because you have two people going on there. So you have two distinct personalities that if you can figure them out with birth order, that's what it's all about. Then you can manipulate your own personality for the greater good. But that younger brother, if he understood there were two other siblings, okay, so he really was number four. He's good with people. He can be the jokester. He likes to have fun, but he may never really focus enough. But that only does some things to him. Now, let's see. I'm thinking of the airline that was run by a CEO that was a four only. That was well, you'd go there and you would never be assigned a seat because as an only child with a
Southwest.
Southwest, right?
Yeah.
Southwest Airlines. Yeah, he was a four only, and he started Southwest Airlines because he said, "Hey, first come, first serve at the table." Okay.
Yeah.
So and remember their attitude. They were fun. They were funny. The stewardesses were funny. They say if you want to smoke, you can go out on the wing. Things like that. Well, that was the humor of the number four. So all CEOs give a flavor to their companies, and that was the flavor, the four flavor. But he had the power. That only gave him the power to make Southwest Airlines what it was.
I love it. When I was in MBA school, we read the Harvard Business Review for that case. And I'm guessing as a Harvard graduate, you might have also.
I hadn't, but,
You hadn't.
But I knew the story.
Well, there is a Harvard Business Review on Southwest Airlines, or multiple ones, at least at this point.
Right.
So this is quite fascinating. So a couple of things, my audience knows me, so I'll go ahead and I feel like there's some psychic thing going on with your research, which I know is you're not probably trying to go woo woo with this. You're staying research and evidence based, but it's really interesting. You said about the addiction. I chose because I was that wild one that you were talking about when I was young. So I actually made a deliberate decision to not involve alcohol or drugs in my life. So at 46 years old, when I tell people I'm sober, they assume that I once was addicted to drugs and alcohol and now I am a sober person versus me just being sober my entire life and never having drugs or alcohol as part of my story. So I knew that about myself.
That only side gave you the power over the number three, who you also are, and said, don't do this. You have two people, one on either shoulder. One's telling the other one what to do. And that's a wonderful story. I mean, that says it all. That's how birth order works. Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah. And instead, the other part of that you said, I would say the work that I do as an entrepreneur running 3 companies, kind of seeing the world and how to love and change the world definitely fits with me and with birth order. Would it be surprising to you to learn that the number 4 only, my brother, has never left home? He still lives at home with my parents at 36 years old.
Not at all. They're taking care of him. Yeah. He had 2 ways that he could have gone. He could have gone the way of the Southwest Airlines guy and took that entrepreneurial jump, but he took number 4 way out. He said, somebody's going to take care of me. And, they would love to get him out of the house, I'm sure. But
I don't know.
It was such an attraction. It was so easy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they don't, you have to think about how they respond. If the 4 says, I'm the baby, take care of me, the only part says, you can say that to your older sister. He can come to you and say, I want your car tonight. And, what? And you probably give it to him. But anyway, but he's probably a likable guy, but he's, it's hard for him. He's got two very different personalities, and actually understanding birth order would help him, because then he could understand the influences on him, because he's torn between being the baby and trying to be in charge. And every time he's in charge, the baby says, "You can't do this. It's impossible. You can't do this." And the other side says, "Yes, you can. Suck it up. Be an adult. You can do it." The other one says, "No, you can't. Take care of me."
Yeah. You're just nailing my whole family. He actually owns his own business, but so
But
it's like, but still can't quite fly the nest or whatever that saying is.
Well,
So,
what happens with business and birth order is that if somebody like your brother, now he can be in charge as the only, but if he becomes the number four, then people in his business that have higher birth orders than him will say, "You can't tell me what to do. You're incompetent. You don't know what you're doing." When he's a four, they are superior to him, and he's no longer the boss. That's the problem. That's the problem.
wow. Okay. So now, then, at 15 years old, I went back and forth between the two homes, and my mom then has another child, my
Okay.
little sister. So now I have very adult older siblings, my younger brother, myself, who's now a teenager, 15, and now we have a new baby in the house. But interestingly enough, my little brother and my little sister don't know each other and aren't related in any way. So I have, we call ourselves the originals, which is really terrible. 1, 2, and 3. I shouldn't
Well,
admit that on the
now that little
podcast.
sister is how many years younger than number four brother?
And for brother, not related,
I know, but
right?
you were in the same family. The
Yes.
relationship isn't important. It's were you
It-
raised in the same family?
yeah. So 1987 to 1994, 7 years difference.
Okay, that one, if that one understands the family, the originals, we'll
Yeah.
call them, that one becomes a five only,
Okay.
which is a one only.
Okay.
That could be, a very well put together person. They know what they're doing. They're in charge. They're not a problem. They follow the rules, but not, so it's a five only. She's a five only, and she's stronger than you.
Yes. And she is very much a rule follower.
Yes, right.
Yes.
What's interesting about birth order, and some people say, are there any, give me some examples. How can this be true? Well, I'll tell you one example is look in your family album. Who's got the most pictures? That's number one. And then, then on down the line, he gets less pictures and less pictures. But you go to family functions, the baby's still at the little kids table, and even though he might be a mortgage banker or something. But the other thing is, if you give me the information like you have, and I can describe your family without ever meeting them, there must be something to this.
Yes. So
It's gotta be.
let's talk about the evidence for birth order, because clearly you're researching it. So have there been publications? Have you published your research?
Yes. It's my research is based on normal children.
Okay.
Most of the research is based from, because I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I'm an orthodontist.
Right.
So I looked at normal people, and in fact, my book is based on normal people, and I give examples, all the different possible combinations in a family of people that you would know, actors, actresses, politicians, families you would know. And then, so it's based on normal people. A lot of the research that's been done, they don't look for the double birth order. They just say, what is your number? So it's all flawed. Okay, it's that, they might be dealing with a two only, but they put them down as a two. And they might be dealing with a three, but she's really a three only. Very different people. And so if they don't understand double birth order, the sample is wrong, and you're never going to get the right results. And that's why there's a lot of negative things about birth order, because they say it doesn't work. Well, it doesn't work because it make it too simple. I found that out myself, and that's when I found the Rosetta Stone to answer the question. So that's where it all came from. So that's a great question, but that's why if you look at Amazon, even though I tell you don't buy the book from Amazon because that's the one that's not in color, it doesn't have the questions at the back.
Yeah, always buy directly from the author. I think that this audience knows that. You're not going to find my book on Amazon, always on the website of the author.
But there's some reviews on there, and I read one review, and it was a lady that said, I was really interested in birth order. I don't know exactly what she said, but she went out and she bought a whole bunch of birth order books, and she started going through them. And then she said, I read your book and I threw all the others away. She says, yours was the only one that answered all the questions. The others just made it too simple, and it's not that simple, but it's not that difficult either.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that in your book, this is the publication of a lot of your research, right?
Oh, yes.
In the evidence that you are finding and how it's working in your own practice. I just see a huge opportunity in the future for like you just nailed my whole family, and it's like a little creepy almost, like, wow, how did you know all these things about my siblings? So I want to stay being selfish here for a minute, Dr. Hurst. I'm a mom, and so I want to hear about shorter. So in my family, I just told you these giant spaces. There's 25 years between my older brother and my younger sister, right? Like these huge spaces, like, we didn't kind of all grow up together. So when I became a mom, I did do this on purpose, actually. So my children are very close together, 15 months apart, 2 males. You pretty perfectly described the 1 and the 2, but I was wondering about, like, when they're so close together, they're only 1 year apart in school, they have all the same friends, and one of them, my youngest, the number 2, did have a stroke and has cerebral palsy. Pretty mild. But I was just wondering if you could give a little insight, because you were talking a little bit about if they had a disability.
Yes.
And but my number 1, he's a showstopper. And my number 2, he's very quiet.
Okay, here's what. Well, when did he have the stroke?
At
How
birth. Yeah, at birth. Yeah.
Okay. So, what's happened here is that first of all, when you have 2 siblings close together, if everything's normal, you want to have a little sibling rivalry, but also you want to be careful that don't let them both play the same sports. They're going to be competitive enough. In other words, one might play football, one might play baseball, one might, soccer. So you don't want too much competition.
Oh my gosh, Dr. Hurst, I have to stop you right there. My children are 9 and 10. Because it's so easy to put them on the same team, they've never played separate. They are on the same basketball team, the same tennis team, the same swim team, and the same soccer team.
Yes, but one of them has a little cerebral palsy.
Yeah.
So number 1 sees number 2 as no threat.
Yes.
So number 1 can be the nicest, sweetest kid that you want, because he's taking care of his younger brother who has a problem. Mm-hmm. Now, it would be different if the problem was so severe that he wasn't functioning at all. Mm-hmm. And then number 1 gets very jealous of all the attention that number 2 gets. But because of the disability, playing the same sports, it's okay, because number 2 is not expected to be as good as number 1. Number 1 is looking out for his little brother and taking care of him. And that's how he's going to be all his life. He's going to be a really nice guy, because he likes to take care. He doesn't feel threatened. When you feel threatened, then you change your personality a little bit. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Hillary Clinton is a number 1 with 2 younger brothers.
Okay.
She felt threatened by those younger brothers. So she became tough as nails. And she wants to tell everybody what to do, but she's really, really strong. Well, that's number one. Number one wants to be in charge. But another type of number one, Julia Childs, she was also a number one. Should she want to tell people what to do? All she did was cook for them and make them happy, and then they feel, well, look at this wonderful meal I made for you. She just bribed them in a different way. She was still in charge. But all birth orders have two sides to them. And if you have a double birth order, there are four sides. But they express themselves a little differently. But with your two boys, remember the Cain and Abel story. That was the ultimate in sibling rivalry. That's not going to happen in your case. And that's when you have to look at the whole picture, you have to say, was somebody in the family disabled? Yes. That changes the whole structure of your family.
It really
So, like
does.
I say, in the book, I think it's the first chapter, it talks about finding your true birth order. And there's a questionnaire in there, and you go through and you put down the ages of everybody, and then you answer questions like, who did the kids live with? If they live with a grandparent, then they're not part of your family. Okay, was it a blended family? Was anybody sick in the family? Were there any twins? I mean, you must see that all the time, with these ladies giving birth. And they have a choice when they develop their family. Do you want a cohesive family with the kids close together? Or do you want individual families? Space them out 4 or more years apart. You saw that in your family. You have 1, 2, 3. You have 4 families. The first 2 was the first family. Then you were a family by yourself. Then your brother was a family by himself. And then your sister was a family by herself. So your parents, they had these individual families.
It's just blowing my mind, you guys, this conversation. I'm just like, wow. Oh, I am. So just full transparency. We came to this conversation in the holiday season, and I didn't get an opportunity to read Dr. Hurst's book in advance. So I really am coming in as curious as all of you listening, because I will be reading this book in the new year with everyone. And I actually host a book club with my private doula clients, and I'd really like to use this book as part of our next book club. I think it would be really interesting for everyone who's starting their families and expanding their families also.
Well, I'd be happy to come on Zoom with your book club after they read it and answer all their questions.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me tell you an interesting story, which probably won't surprise you at all. I am now single and I've been dating. And every now and then I have a cute little conversation with my kids. We have a rule that they will never meet someone unless it's been more than a year of dating that person, and it would be a significant person in their life. But the first question they ask me is, do they have any children? And then they ask me what their sex or genders are. And then they are a hard no if it's above them. So they only want me to date someone whose children are younger than them. If I say,
That's amazing. They picked up on it without knowing it because they don't want to be demoted.
it's wild to me because I've said, oh, I've met this person and I might go on a date with them, and they'll say, how old are their kids? And I'll say 12 and 11, and mine are 9 and 10. And they'll say, no.
No. That is because they would not get along in the new family because they both would be demoted.
Mm-hmm.
So you brought up something that I talk to people about all the time, but you're making decisions based on birth order and not even knowing it. It's the force that's running behind. Your boys don't understand birth order. Oh, yes, they do.
Mm-hmm.
You can see.
Mm-hmm.
We use in nature. It's true too. There's a bird, a cuckoo, that never makes its own nest. The cuckoo bird, and I think it's in Australia, and it's a very big bird, and they use another bird's nest. And when they lay their egg in that bird's nest, there are already some eggs for the other bird, which is much smaller. And the cuckoo always hatches first and pushes the other eggs out because they need all the food that these smaller birds can give them. So we use the example of the cuckoo is a very selfish, only child. But it's birth order's in nature. It works.
So, Dr. Hurst, I told you that I'm now single, and my children have this huge opinion in how we're going to either plan our like next family unit or not. I was really wanting to understand from you about birth order and compatibility in relationships. Like, are there birth order compatibilities that you found in your research that lead to divorce more often or longer relationships? How does that impact love?
Well, that's a question everybody wants the answers to.
Mm-hmm.
Half the marriages end in divorce, so wouldn't it be nice to know the right person to marry so you don't end up divorced? And birth order can be the answer to that. There's two types of love at first sight, but let me first say every possible combination can work. They just take more work to make them work.
Mm-hmm.
But the ones that take less work are the two types of love at first sight. The first one is if you meet someone with your same birth order. If you met someone that was also a 3 only birth order, you would click immediately because you see life the same way and you finish each other's sentences. But the problem is that there can only be one image in the mirror at a time because you're the same. So somebody has to step out of the picture and you have to divide up things. But that's one type of love at first sight. The other type of love at first sight is if you meet someone that represents the gender that you're looking to marry in your same family because you understand that birth order position. For instance, you had, I think you said the very first one was a boy
Yes.
and the second was a girl.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you met a number 1 boy
Mm-hmm.
that had a 3 only sister, it's a perfect match because you had a number 1 brother
Mm-hmm.
and this person would have had a number 3 only sister. So if you match the birth order in your family, now you also could meet a 4 only because there was a boy in your family that was a
Mm-hmm.
4 only.
There was.
Yes, that would work also because you understand that, but of course you'll never leave the house.
Yeah. But
You'll
I
be in
know
charge.
how to love those two types of personalities that are very different.
Yeah, you understand, you grew up. Now, what's difficult is that if you grew up with all girls in your family, you can make the match, but it's never perfect because you didn't understand that other gender. You didn't grow up with any boys. Or if
Mm-hmm.
they're all boys and they never grew up with a girl, they might match the number, but they don't match the gender. So I always say, well, your wife understands you better than you. And oh yeah, that's true. You hear that. But
Ah,
what I'm talking about, your clientele, they have a choice to make with their family. Do they want to have a close, cohesive family with children 2 and 3 years apart? Or do they want these separate individual families spacing them out 4 or more years apart? Because they're going to get very different kids, for sure.
mhm. Yes. And I know, like in birth work and the audience listening, like I know many of my clients that do try to have them close together. And it's very interesting. I'll see clients that very easily have two children and then they end up having a longer fertility journey. Like somehow they just, years go by with loss or just not getting pregnant, too. So, and, I don't know what
Well,
role the world
and then
plays in that, but.
they have a 3 only, like you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the older kids they say, well, that, Heidi, she's just spoiled, she's whatever. And then Heidi can say, she says, well, look, my parents had just waited long enough to have the right child that would be perfect, and that's me.
Yes. My parents would say we were learning how to be parents with your brother and sister because for sure I was for the originals. I was for sure like the spoiled baby like doted on by both
Right.
parents and my parents say, we just were figuring out how to parent. And then when Heidi came along, we were great parents.
Yeah, the only ones
Um,
always say, "Well, you were special and all that." And said, "Well, I guess I was. They figured it out. Now I'm here."
yeah. I have a question for you when it comes to
Sure.
like promotion or demotion with death. My grandmother was one of 12. You can start to get a sense of Catholicism when you start hearing some of our stories. But so my grandmother on my mother's side was one of 12. She's passed now, but she talked always about being the baby, but that her baby brother had died when he was 5 years old from something that we have a vaccine for at this point. I don't remember if it was polio or
Yeah.
scarlet fever or something, but
That was
something
number 13.
number, no, sorry. Yes. She was number 11. Sorry. Her little brother was number 12.
Yeah, okay.
So she was one of 12. So I was just sort of curious, like, that's just, I don't have another story. I don't have another story to share about this type of experience other than my grandmother's, and she's not here for me to chat with her about that. But I was just wondering, like, when, if there is a death by a sibling, or in adolescent years, right?
Yes.
So there's either, like, let's say one passes away and two becomes one, or three
Right.
passes away and two, I was just
Sure.
wondering a little bit about that and how that impacts birth order.
Yes, it does. You keep your birth order, but now you have to do the job of the birth order above you. It doesn't affect you if the death was somebody younger than you, but if they're older than you automatically move up. Now that happens later in life too, when the siblings start to die. You will change your position in the family. You're still who you are, but you have to do a different role within the family. So you move up as those older ones die, and then you have to move up. You were saying Catholic family. I did a talk one time at a Catholic school, and I was talking all about the birth orders. And then someone in the audience, they raised their hand and they said, "Dr. Hurst, do you know where you are?" And I said, "Well, I'm at St. Timothy's and whatever." He says, "No, you're talking to Catholics. We don't stop at 4." And I
And
said, "You're right. Okay, so number 5 is like a number 1, and number 6 is like a number 2, and yeah, that's how it works."
yeah, and that makes sense about like I don't know why it cuts off at 4, but that makes sense there that it would repeat or start
Yeah, it's far enough
over.
apart that they can have the same strategies to get the attention as the group above them.
Mm-hmm.
Just there's too many years apart. They can't have the same friends. It's all different. Yeah.
Yeah. And I am thinking about just even you said about the 4 year gaps. And I'm thinking about right now just different clients and different friends and different
Sure.
interactions where I do know that there are 4 or more year gaps that are occurring and what that looks like and their personalities. So this
We're
is
going to have
really,
fun with this.
yeah, it is so fun.
I think all I'm doing is giving you words to describe things you already know. Because as a number 3, I find number 3s get it. I mean, just bang, they get it, and you do.
Yeah. Well, for all the other number threes out there listening, you need to buy this book also. But if you're not a number 3 or a 3 only, I was wondering for those interested in becoming birth order detectives, learning about their real birth order, like for those listening right now that are just like, this is very cool and I want to get my hands on this information. Can you just share what's the best way to buy your book and how to get this information from your website?
Okay, well, there's a couple books out there. The first edition is paperback. You don't want that. You want to get it off the website, which is hardcover, and I'll hold it up here, and it's got color pictures inside. And the website is an easy one to remember, mybirthorder.com.
Very
And
easy.
and actually on the site, not only do we have that, but we also have a narrated version that's on a USB that you can just plug into your computer. and it's narrated by me, and it's got all the color pictures on it as well. But in the book, you're going to be able to find your real birth order. There's a questionnaire in there, and you just follow the steps, and you'll find out who you really are, and you can unmask everybody in your life. But the book itself will give you all the examples of the combinations of boy, girl, girl, boy, and all these different families you would know, and you can find your own family there and say, okay, that's me. So that's all good. Of course, on the website, you'll find other things too, like we have T-shirts. You know, a T-shirt for the only child, it says Superman was an only child, and we know that. But if it's number 1, it says I'm in charge. If it's a number 2, it says don't tell me what to do. If it's a number 3, it says I feel your pain. And if you're number 4, it says I don't want to grow up.
Oh,
You know, so these are good stocking stuffers.
these are great. I was like, what amazing presents. I love it. You're very creative and you're entrepreneurial. It's interesting that you're an orthodontist. So I love the way in which you came to this work and what you're doing with it. How fun, how interesting, and like may this research continue. So I appreciate you being on, Dr. Hurst. I've learned so much. It's been really fun. And I'm going to link everything in the show notes to make it really easy for the audience to be able to buy a t-shirt, find your book, and connect with you. So thanks for being here today.
Wonderful. Thank you for a wonderful interview.
Thank you for listening to Birth Story. My goal is you will walk away from each episode with a clear picture of how labor and delivery might go, and that you will feel empowered by the end of your pregnancy to speak up, plan and prepare for the birth you want, no matter what that looks like.